Hello and welcome back to Black Magic Craft. I have been a busy boy stuck in the trenches, continuing to build my Trench Crusade board. My first addition are some modular bunkers, but since it's Trench Crusade, I got to decorate them with some really cool thematic holy iconography, which is appropriate because I'm a very holy boy. The construction of these is pretty simple, meaning I can make quite a few of them without it taking too much time. I cut some 1 centimeter thick strips of XPS foam to make up the walls. Then I set my hot wire at an angle, and I chose 60 degrees, but really as long as you're making 3-sided bunkers, you can make this angle and this miter whatever you want. Using the rip fence to set the length of my walls, I cut my foam strips at 10 centimeters long. For each bunker, I made 2 pieces that had an angle on one side and a straight 90-degree cut on the other. And then one that had the angle cut on both ends. This would be the middle piece. The 2 ends should be the same length, but the center one can be as long as you want it to be. I traced out some lines to cut in those classic horizontal shooty holes that you see in all the best bunkers. Once they were laid out, I just cut them out with a fresh X-Acto blade. Don't need to get too overly complicated or fancy with this. I did want to make them fit a bit more into the Trench Crusade setting, so I decided that these bunkers would be created by the forces of New Antioch. I thought, it would look really cool to make some of these cutouts crucifix shaped. A very simple detail that I think makes a huge difference in selling the aesthetic that these are meant to exist in. Before assembly, I used a large stone to give all of the foam surfaces some rough, battle-worn concrete texture. And then to assemble it, it was just a matter of hot gluing the pieces together. This is where I hit a bit of a struggle. The cutouts on the walls were pretty high up, so I felt like there needed to be platforms for models to stand on so that they could believably reach and shoot out of them. I messed around with some foam strips, but it kind of looked weird where it crossed over the center of the crucifix cutout, and I just didn't like the general looks of it, so I ended up ripping them off and moving on to capping the top of the bunkers with some slabs of foam. Then I tried a different approach for the platform. This was a bit better, but I still wasn't happy with it. It just didn't feel right. So I decided to not put in any type of platform on the other ones and just break the first one that I had in place so that it was kind of there, but less awkward looking. I planned on these being used individually on the battlefield, but it was important to me that I didn't have anything protruding from the tops so that I could stack them if I wanted to. They needed some weight though, and just like how I kept the tops clear for stacking, I had to keep the bottoms clear without bases so that they could be placed on my modular trenches that were highly textured and contained objects and craters. So to add weight without obstruction, I used a whole bunch of drywall screws, just screwed right into the foam from the bottom. This works surprisingly well and doesn't add anything that'll look weird or get in the way. Now as I add some battle damage, let's take a second to talk about this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website builder and host. I use it for both of my main websites because it's so easy to use. They've got a bunch of theme templates to start with depending on what type of website you need. And from there, they've got a simple drag and drop system for customizing your site to meet your needs. If you want to use your site for some sort of e-commerce, you can use their storefront options that make it as simple as possible to set up a web store and get sales rolling and shipping. I've got product available on both my websites where I sell my own stuff like art and terrain, but also my own dark skirmish game. And with the shipping integrations that Squarespace has, it's really convenient for me to get orders packed and shipped out even just as a one-person operation. You can try out Squarespace for free. And then once you're hooked on their easy to use systems, you can use the link and the code in my video description to get 10% off your new website or domain. Like I've been doing a lot lately, I opted to coat these pieces in a protective layer of acrylic caulking. I used one that was already black and mixed in some fine decorative sand to add just some gritty texture. I use this essentially as a very thick primer coat. It's nice because it also adds some weight and it remains flexible over time, so it's unlikely that it will ever crack or chip. It's like putting a rubber shell all around your foam piece. It's also thick enough to fill in any gaps or seams that you might want to hide. I love it. DAP Dynaflex 230. It's the magic sauce. I'll drop a link to this stuff in the video description. I went extra simple with the paint job on these. I didn't use the airbrush, just some fog gray craft paint and a makeup brush. Then I took some of the same brownish gray that I had mixed up for the trench pieces and stippled it up on the bottoms of the bunkers. This would help make them blend in with the trench pieces and look more natural. I also stippled in some of the chestnut brown that I had used on the board pieces. Now, despite being a very simple paint job, I was impressed with just how dynamic these actually looked. Of course, I couldn't resist still hitting them with a gnarly, disgusting, and dirty oil wash. This is what makes them look like they truly belong on a battlefield. As is, they would be ready to use, but I wanted to add just a little bit of extra Christian iconography. So I thought I'd try doing some inkjet image transfers. You can do this by printing out images on normal paper with an inkjet printer. You just paint on some matte medium onto the object. In my case, I used Mod Podge. Then you stick on the paper, ink side down, push it flat, and let it dry for a couple minutes. Afterwards, you can tear away the paper, and the idea is that only the ink will remain. You can remove the last remnants of the paper with a damp sponge. Just don't be too aggressive because you don't want to wipe off the ink. I then tried to do some much more complicated images, full color ones. These wouldn't have to be perfect. I wanted them to look like they were painted onto the sides of the bunkers and damaged over time. However, they ended up too messed up even to look like that. The fact that the surface of the bunkers was pretty dark and very rough made this technique not work very well. It works great on a smooth, light-colored surface, but this was not it. It did leave a faint bit of the image that looked very old and weathered, so it wasn't a complete loss, but I decided to switch gears and take a traditional decoupage approach by just gluing on a bunch of the images face side out with Mod Podge as if they were canvases plastered to the bunker walls. This worked much better. I did some fun stuff like covering one of them with a whole bunch of images of St. Michael, as well as part of the prayer to St. Michael in Latin on some banners. I felt like this was very appropriate for a military force literally facing off against the legions of hell. And these banners draped over with the old Christian paintings just looked really cool. Last, I hit them with some of the same oil wash that I used on the bunkers, just to make them look as if they had been there for a long time and weren't too oddly fresh looking.
Sancte Michael Arcangele, defende-nos in proelio, contra nequitiam, et insidias diaboli, esto praesidium. Imperetili Deus, supplices de precamur, tuque, princeps militiae caelestis, satana maliosque spiritus malignos, quia perditionem animarum pervagantur in mundo, divina virtute, in infernum detrude. Amen.
These bunkers might be simple, but they are one of my favorite things I've made in a long time. I love trying to find that great balance between simplicity and usability, and the fact that they have this sort of unique look with the religious details is very exciting to me. These aren't just your normal military bunkers. They're something different and unsettling that lives in this weird world of Trench Crusade. The more I add to this board and the more this set progresses, the more excited I get. I can't wait to move on to the next pieces. All right, that's a wrap for this one, but it is certainly not the end of this Trench Crusade adventure. I got lots more I want to do for this board so that I can get playing. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do all the YouTube stuff if you did. Like the video, comment, share it, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. If you want to help me and the channel out and get something cool for yourself in the process, head over to blackmagiccraft.ca or idolsoftorment.com. On those websites, I sell my own game as well as original terrain, artwork, and other cool stuff. And of course, if you really want to help this channel out, one of the best ways you can do it is by supporting the channel on Patreon. I'd love to have you as the newest member of the fellowship. And until next time, cheers.